It's dawn in Tanzania, and a Hadza hunter is already 3 miles from camp, moving fast and quiet through dry grass, tracking a kudu, a large, spiral-horned antelope, by fresh droppings pressed into the dirt. You're behind him, breathing hard, sweating through your shirt after 20 minutes. He hasn't broken a sweat. By noon, he'll have covered ground you can't imagine covering. You won't make it past mile 2, but keeping pace with him isn't actually the hardest part of surviving his day. The real test is everything that happens after the hunt ends, and most people fail it before lunch. For over a decade, anthropologists have followed the Hadza of Tanzania, one of the last people on Earth who still hunt and forage for nearly all of their food, the way every human once did. What they measured didn't just track fitness, it rewrote what fitness actually means. So here's the test. 4 rounds. See how far you actually get. Round 1 is tracking. Anthropologist Brian Wood has spent years walking alongside Hadza hunting parties through the bush, watching them read the ground the way you might read a page of text. A hunter here carries a handmade bow strung with animal sinew and arrows tipped in a poison brewed from a local shrub, strong enough to bring down an animal many times his size within hours. But the poison only matters if the arrow lands, and the arrow only lands if he's close enough. Can you tell a fresh track from one left an hour ago? Most people can't tell the difference between a kudu print and a dent in the dirt. Wood's fieldwork shows Hadza hunters reading depth, shape, and spacing in a single glance at a full walking pace without ever stopping to think about it consciously. Anthropologist Frank Marlowe, who spent years living with Hadza communities, documented just how few people still carry this exact skill. Only around 1,000 Hadza remain, and only a portion of them still forage full-time. Some hunts don't even happen in daylight. Hadza men also wait motionless near watering holes after dark, betting on nothing but stillness and patience to bring something within range. All of this happens under equatorial sun, often past 90 degrees Fahrenheit by mid-morning, with no water bottle and no shade for miles at a stretch. Still think you'd have made it this far? Dehydration alone ends most modern attempts at this before the tracking skill is even tested. If you can't hold a brisk, uneven pace across broken terrain for 3 or 4 hours while also reading the ground beneath you, you're eliminated in round 1 before the hunt has produced anything to eat. Round 2 is the rest, and this is where most modern bodies fail without ever realizing it. Biological anthropologist David Raichlen strapped small motion-sensing devices called accelerometers to the thighs of real Hadza adults and tracked exactly how they spent every non-hunting hour of the day. His team found that Hadza adults rest for close to 10 hours a day. That's almost the same number of hours a typical office worker spends sitting. Familiar so far, right? Here's what isn't. The Hadza barely sit in chairs because they don't really have any. Instead, they drop into a full squat, heels flat on the ground, weight balanced low over the ankles, and hold it comfortably through an entire conversation or meal. Raichlen's team clocked Hadza adults squatting for roughly 18% of their resting time and kneeling for another 12%, with almost none of it spent in anything resembling a chair-sitting posture. To measure what that squat was actually doing to the body, his team used electromyography, a technique that records the electrical signal firing inside a muscle to show exactly how hard it's working. Squatting, it turns out, keeps the legs quietly engaged the entire time you're resting. Chair-sitting doesn't. Try holding a deep squat right now. Notice how your own legs feel after even a few minutes in that position. 10 seconds in, most knees are already screaming. For a Hadza adult, it's simply the default way to rest. Raichlen calls this the inactivity mismatch hypothesis, the idea that human bodies likely evolved expecting rest itself to include a decent amount of muscle activity, and that swapping every resting posture for a soft chair may be its own quiet health problem. Researchers have since linked populations who rest this way to lower rates of heart disease and diabetes, the cardiovascular and metabolic conditions so common in places full of couches and office chairs. Round 3 is the math you can't skip. Once the hunt ends, or the digging stick has pulled up enough wild tubers, or the honey's been smoked out of a hollow tree, the calories collected have to actually cover the calories just spent, because there's no gas station waiting, no delivery driver, no fridge back home stocked in advance. Baobab fruit, wild berries, and honey raided straight from wild hives round out the diet, each demanding its own separate skill to find, reach, or safely extract, often from many feet up a thorned tree or deep inside a hollow trunk guarded by very unhappy bees. Can you even tell which wild root is food and which one will make you sick for days? Most people who've only ever bought groceries wrapped in plastic genuinely cannot. This knowledge doesn't arrive overnight. Hadza children start learning to identify edible plants and safe digging spots by early childhood, spending years absorbing information city-raised adults would need a field guide and a poison control hotline to approximate. This round alone eliminates almost everyone who somehow made it through rounds 1 and 2. Round 4 is where the real twist is waiting, and it's the one almost nobody predicts correctly. You'd assume all that walking, digging, and climbing adds up to a body burning enormous extra fuel every single day, far more than someone who drives to an office and sits at a desk for 8 hours straight. Duke University evolutionary anthropologist Herman Pontzer set out to actually measure that instead of just assuming it. Older studies had guessed at hunter-gatherer calorie burn using questionnaires and rough estimates of activity level, methods that leave enormous room for error. Pontzer's method, called doubly labeled water, sidesteps guessing altogether. Participants drink water made with a special, harmless tracer, and researchers later measure exactly how quickly that tracer leaves the body through urine, which reveals, with real precision, how many calories a body burned in the days in between. Pontzer's team ran this test on real Hadza hunters and gatherers in the field, then compared the results directly against sedentary adults living in the United States and Europe. The numbers came back almost identical. So where did all that extra effort actually go? Despite walking for miles, despite digging, climbing, and carrying loads all day, with no cars, no elevators, and barely a chair in sight, Hadza adults burn roughly the same total number of calories in a day as someone sitting at a desk in an office. Pontzer and his colleagues later described this pattern with a term that's since spread across exercise science, the constrained total energy expenditure model. It's the idea that a body doesn't just keep burning more and more fuel the harder it works, hour after hour, without limit. Instead, the body appears to defend something closer to an internal calorie budget, quietly dialing down energy spent elsewhere whenever activity goes up somewhere else, so the total stays strangely stable no matter how demanding the day actually gets. It's a strange, almost uncomfortable idea to sit with once you actually let it in. Pontzer later found similar patterns comparing humans against our closest primate relatives, which suggests this isn't just a quirk of one particular tribe in one particular place. It may be something closer to a rule of how human bodies work everywhere. So the version of this test you are probably picturing, the one where raw physical endurance is what separates you from a Hadza hunter, was never really the point of any of this. His body isn't burning some heroic multiple of what yours burns on an ordinary day. It's spending the exact same fuel in a completely different shape across a completely different day. All those hours you just watched him spend tracking, squatting, digging, and hauling weren't burning some extra reserve tank of energy modern life left untapped. They were simply where his fixed daily budget went, instead of into a commute, a desk chair, and a couch. Pontzer wrote about this discovery in a book called Burn, and the implication reaches far beyond one tribe in Tanzania. If total daily calorie burn stays this stable regardless of activity level, then exercise alone was never going to be the main lever for weight control that gyms and fitness apps promise it is. Diet does far more of that work than most people want to hear. None of this means movement doesn't matter. Hadza adults still show far lower rates of the diseases tied to modern sedentary life, exactly the pattern Raichlen's squatting research also pointed to. It just means the reason movement helps was never really about torching extra calories in the moment. It's closer to keeping the systems inside your body, your heart, your blood vessels, your metabolism, regularly reminded of what they were built to do. Which brings the test back to you, sitting exactly where you are right now. Next time you finish a hard workout and reward yourself by collapsing onto the couch for the rest of the evening, remember what Pontzer's data actually showed. Your body was likely always going to land close to that same daily total regardless, no matter what you did with the hours surrounding the workout itself. The real damage was never really the exercise you occasionally skipped. It's the 8 or 9 hours afterward, spent sunk into cushions instead of on your feet, or crouched low in a squat, or anywhere at all besides folded into the exact shape a chair was built to hold you in, day after day, for years. Think about the last time you sat through a long meeting, or a flight, or an entire movie without once shifting into anything other than a chair. That's the version of rest your body may never have actually been built for. Ask yourself honestly, how many hours of today have you spent in that exact shape already? That's the round most people fail without ever knowing a test was even happening. That Hadza hunter you couldn't keep up with at dawn will burn almost exactly the same number of calories today as you will, sitting back in your chair, wondering how he possibly does it. The miles were never the real test. The chair was.